This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz. It's This Week in XR, January 5th, 2024. Couple of big housekeeping announcements on the verge of CES. First of all, Brian Comiskey was our guest last week. He's the futurist at CES. And this week, our guest is none other than Gary Shapiro, the longtime CEO of CES and its parent, the Consumer Technology Association, which is a trade group. So we'll be excited to welcome Gary in a few minutes after we hit the news. Ted and I do host a party, partly for the podcast. It really just started out as a dinner with friends and got out of control over the past 7 or 8 years. If you are interested in joining us, you can email me personally. You can use the form on my CharlieFincom website, or you can email thisweekinxr@gmail, and I will send you the info. We would love to welcome listeners who are at CES to join us at that event. Oh, yes, and here's the other thing. Last week with Brian, we recorded episode 175, which also resulted in us tripping the 300,000 download milestone. So congratulations to us. It started in July 2020, and I don't know if I really thought I'd be doing it on January 5th, 2024, but here we are.
Yeah, I don't think any of us really thought it would go as long as it did, but it has become a thing that you and I get emails and reach outs all the time from people saying we really enjoy
It's
your take on it, your candor, the way you approach it, and the guests, and it's a fun gathering for us every week too. So it's a good vibe, a good thing.
yes, and even more so since Roni joined us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I'm the new guy. You guys are the OGs.
I don't know. You've passed the 1 year mark, so you're quickly catching up to us.
It's only been a year.
It was a year back in the middle of November.
Okay, so I'm probably like 50 episodes, something like that, 50 something.
So you're getting closer and closer to the green jacket.
Yeah, the fabled green jacket.
The green jacket that neither Ted nor I have. No. So CES, a lot to look forward to. I think this year they're coming back in force. 130,000 tickets sold already, and another probably 10% at least just walk up and buy a ticket. It's open to the public the last day or two. Other news, XReal, again on the cusp of CES, announces it sold 350,000 of its Air 2 AR glasses, and AR, this is AR in the sense of assisted, not augmented reality, because they are a screen reflector. They reflect what's on your smartphone screen. So it's great for gaming. You get you're looking at what appears to be 180-inch screen instead of a 5-inch screen in your hands.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them sitting. For the small amount of people watching on YouTube, that's what it looks like in a case, and
they're cheap. I think we'll see people wearing them in public in places like Starbucks.
Yeah, this is the company that was called Nreal and then changed their name to XReal, and has been one of the leaders in commercializing this technology. Basically taking two high-res OLED screens, making them look kind of like glasses, and you connect them. Most people connect them via USB-C to a smartphone or an iPad or something like that, and it just gives you an extended view, and it works quite well.
I think we will quickly see models that use Bluetooth and do away with the tethering.
Yeah, well, I think it's announced now that the Qualcomm chip, the next gen, the current gen, supports that technology. So I think everything will move to a wireless, and then it'll grow even more.
Well, one of the topics I wanted to bring up was that new Qualcomm chip. that just came out, which was one of the big announcements this week. It is tied, I believe, although they didn't say this explicitly, to the device that they're making with Samsung and Google.
Hmm.
So it powers 12 cameras, 4K per eye. It's advanced specs beyond what we're seeing in today's
Yeah,
devices. But
the big one is the 4K per eye, right? Because that's going to sort of, let's call it, democratize the idea of this exotic kind of video level, like fidelity on your face that previously we could only get putting it on a wall somewhere, 4K or 8K. And now these kind of ultra high resolution um, devices are going to start to become more commonplace, and prices will lower. There'll be a lot more choices, a lot more different
Well, that's
styles
going
and
to
comfort
erode
and range.
Apple's advantage, right? Like basically once you hit 4K, there's not that much more resolution you need, and it's going to hit a quality threshold. Then there'll be other factors,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
same thing happened with smartphones, right? Where there were low res smartphones and high res smartphones were super exotic and expensive, and the DPI dots per inch was always a big discussion. And then at some point, it just
well,
became completely neutralized, that discussion, because everyone had effectively the same resolution on their smartphone, whether you were in the Android camp or the Apple camp. And the same thing is going to happen very quickly with the wearable world.
here's another one for you guys. And Roni mentioned this to me in pre-roll. Of course, Mickey Mouse has gone public this week. He's entered the public
Well,
domain.
a singular version of Mickey Mouse, which is an interesting distinction, right? The
Yeah,
Steamboat Willie cartoon is, I guess, over 100 years old now, I
it
guess.
is true, but the Mickey Mouse model advanced year after year after year. So in each subsequent year, a number of other versions of Mickey become available.
Hmm.
So it isn't going to be limited to Steamboat Willie for that long.
Right.
Well,
It's
here's the
interesting.
issue. Like Disney enjoyed 100 years of protection with that one and subsequent versions. But let's just go to AI for a second. What's going to happen with copyrights and trademarks and other things that these big AI systems have just absorbed without any permission? Right. When you look at how Disney has so protected all of its characters and copyrights with such ferocity, is it going to stand for a long time that AI companies can just willy-nilly absorb not only the copyrights of big companies, but personal copyrights? Like, why should TED stuff that by act of creating it belongs to TED? That's the US copyright law. Why should your stuff suddenly be fodder for anyone to ingest in?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be the interesting question, right?
Well, you posted it on the internet for
Yes.
free.
Yes.
So, that suggests a certain level of permission. Obviously, the New York Times, for example, has a point because their stuff's behind a firewall. So they really did sneak in and steal that,
Hmm.
if indeed a lot of New York Times content was used, which, I mean, the New York Times content alone could train a model.
But I don't think charging means people can use your copyrighted art or words without your permission. Now,
I
I'm
don't think
not an
arguing,
IP.
I would argue that using is now a very subjective word.
Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this jibes with the legal understanding of the current law. It may be one of these things that the Supreme Court says this has got to go back to the judiciary, and you've got to make new laws to deal with it because it isn't anticipated in current laws. But I was thinking about what you said last week, and I only really half agree with you. You said that unless there's a ruling that protects all that intellectual property, that it's going to lead to the end of Western business. And I just don't know if I totally agree with that. The benefit of these models is such that all of the columns and everything it quote unquote stole from me in order to build its model. I don't have a problem with that. And maybe there should be a royalty, but the royalty would be for my 500 columns. The royalty would be like 5 cents. So you know what? Keep it, guys.
Well, you make that point kind of interestingly when you take about a subject matter like Mickey Mouse, which is so iconic and so monetizable. They can put layers of legal protection and legal cycles and dollars into working that, jiggering those levers, right? When you start to lower that threshold of what's monetizable and everything just kind of is like, well, I can make a little bit of money of this and no one's going to know, and AI sort of kind of adapts to it. I think that's kind of more Roni's point. I think there are always going to be things that will live on top of that threshold. The thing is that threshold is going to be fairly tight, right? Of things that are sort of important enough that lawyers will get involved at every step of the equation,
Yeah.
and then everything else will just drop below that threshold.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting choice that people developing models today have to look at, whether they're going to take the OpenAI approach and sort of pay the piper later and hope it's not too severe,
I imagine just
or
to
you have to, or you go and license the content you need to build the AI uh, that you need
yeah,
or want to sell.
I imagine, Charlie, to promote our session at CES on Monday at the ARIA. That's a lot of probably what we'll be talking about in person on a panel together. So it'll be interesting.
Well, the impact because of the many applications that AI now offers filmmakers and creative people, it sort of becomes an instant issue. And as we talked about for many weeks, it was a big issue in the strike. I still don't think properly resolved. We're going to be back here again.
Mhm.
Uh, anyway, moving right along. Do you guys know about Perplexity? I just learned about them when they raised $76.3 million from NEA and Nvidia and Bessemer Ventures, and I guess Jeff Bezos was putting money in personally. It looks like they're trying to do what Bard does,
Mm.
right? They want to make search better. And I have to say, Bard, there were rumors this week about Bard offering a paid subscription level because of their new model being so much more effective and their desire to compete with ChatGPT, which made $1.6 billion in 2023. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I will say, have you guys been using Bard?
I've been using the Bing one more than Bard, but I used both, and I think the Bing part of this tied to OpenAI is their kind of re-foray into becoming relevant in search, right? And using the voice component and all of that. So this is yet another player. And then the other one wasn't didn't both Google and Amazon invest in Anthropic as well,
Yep.
right? So Google's kind of hedging their bets around
Yeah.
the playing field now, right? Kind of interesting. They do their
I've
own
been,
stuff and external stuff.
here's what Bard does really well that Bing doesn't do. It uh, helps with search, and it does that much better than Bing. It doesn't do annotations as well as Bing,
Hmm.
but it is very good if I go to it and say I'm writing my column and I say what were the top 10 tech stories this week. It really is quite good, and I don't have to search, and it offers summaries right there on the results page, and nowhere to be seen is the old AdSense AdWords all over it, or all of these sort of paid traps that are built into a regular search page. They did something here that was right for the user, and we don't see that very often. So I think Google is doing a lot of things right. I would absolutely try. I tried the X subscription for Grok, and I would try a Google paid subscription for Bard for sure. I'm not keeping my subscription to Grok, but I had it for a month and I used it a bunch, and it was not bad, but it's giving you Twitter information. And if you're doing a search for news, Twitter information is second and third hand.
I also saw something that could be a little ancillary to this, and I didn't actually delve into it, but I will probably today because it just kind of passed through in one of my feeds, and there was something that mentioned that Google is planning on or already in the process of abandoning the cookie structure. The idea that you click in and you accept the cookie so that they can track you. Did you guys
Yeah.
read anything about this? Is
I
this
did see that. I
yeah?
did see that, and I think that's going to have a huge impact on people's ad businesses. It's a little bit like what happened to Apple with what happened to Meta when Apple changed its following policies. So I think that's a story to watch for
But I just
sure.
wonder if that's like a cross section of what they're doing with the new AI, sort of what you're talking about. You're using sort of an AI prompt to search as well as instead of just the classic Google search,
Yes.
which will link to your cookies. And they're realizing that they're going to evolve this as well. So it's not like they're getting rid of the cookie. They're just rechanging the nomenclature and rechanging how it works and how it's going to link into you to get you the most relevant results, and somehow track you in the future. So they're
All right.
maybe being proactive
We've
about
got we've got Gary in the waiting room. We
it.
can't
Okay,
keep
great.
this dude waiting. By the way, here, let me click him in. It's Gary. his PR person. A ChatGPT store opens next week. I don't know. We'll get into that at some point. I have a lot to say about the ChatGPT store, but again, a story to watch. We'll see what they really have to offer. But CES is at the top of our minds and at the top of the news. And here we have the man himself, Gary Shapiro. Gary, welcome, welcome. This is like the first day of CES, or sort of counting down by the hours at this point. So for you to be here with us at a moment like this is truly an honor. Thank you.
Well, I am honored to be with you. I mean, it is a little bit fortuitous because honestly, I am not in Las Vegas. My team is either there or on the way there, but this is a special day in my family. It is my in-laws' 60th wedding anniversary today. So we have a little bit of
Well,
a surprise planned for them, and I am leaving tomorrow morning for Las Vegas.
Very nice. Congratulations. Nice that you're getting some time before you have to deal with the melange of everything in Vegas. So,
I think this is a
great.
great example of somebody who has their priorities right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first time since I've met my wife I've been able to spend their anniversary with them because this is the latest we've had CES. So I owe 20 years here of marriage to backing up for this one. So there you go.
That's an interesting spot to start, Gary. CES is, in my recollection of being, 27-year veteran of CES or whatever it is, the latest in January that it's hit in my recollection. Is there a reasoning or a specific multiple things that happened to push it a few days out? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was begging Las Vegas about a dozen years ago to do that because we planned, 15, 20 years out. We felt we were too close to January 1. It
Hmm.
really was a burden for a lot of companies and their engineers and folks that worked over Christmas and New Year's. I also, we wanted to get away from New Year's. A lot of people have to go there and it's very expensive to be there New Year's. So we wanted that extra week, honestly. We took it during 2021 when we went purely digital. We said, hey, we're digital. We can actually change the show dates and no one will care, which is what we did by a week. We also like to be away from the weekend because hotel rates theoretically are lower. Las Vegas fills up without us every weekend, and we'd rather have the pressure. Also, we like to be there during the business week. And this is after starting January 5th last, or is it January 6th through 9th, 23? 24, 9th through 12th is really comfortable for us. Although I think I was in the office yesterday and we were talking about how, we're kind of restless. We wish we were there already and it started. Now we're like, careful what you
No, we
ask for, you get
appreciate
it.
all us veterans appreciate the extra couple days of holiday before we dive into our first
I
big
I
festival.
can't tell you how many years I was skiing or someplace with the family, and they left to go home, and I went to Las Vegas.
Me too.
Well, that's cool.
So, Gary, you have been CEO of CES since 1990.
1991. I've had different titles, but I've been in charge of CES. At that point, I was a group vice president under a bigger organization that we ended up breaking away from. But I reported to our own board, and we were independent in just about every way. And then we became fully independent, and the bigger organization honestly just went away.
So let's start in the past. Ted and I are pastists. Futurists are just pastists. So let's start in the past. What were those CESs like in the early 90s? Of course, I went to many of them, but I want to hear your sort of perspective now, looking back as it's just grown and grown.
Well, my first CES was in the early 1980s, so that really goes back. And I went there with the senior partner, I was a lawyer, and the senior partner of the law firm, and the association was a client. And he had J. Edward Day was Postmaster General under President Kennedy. He invented the zip code, and it was a cabinet level position to be Postmaster General. And I was so honored to be with him. And he was a very funny guy. He had an electric car at the time, believe it or not, they did exist then, and a yak, and a farm. But no, he made. I don't know how much of this I should say, but actually, um, it was the advent of the VCR, and adult video was pretty
Oh,
prominent.
this was when you had the tent behind the convention center and they had these folding tables. I mean, it was like totally appropriate for the adult industry. They just, looked like they were about to put everything in their trunk at a moment's notice and get out of there.
It was, people forget how important some of that stuff was in like pushing so many new technologies,
Yeah,
whether it was
culturally, absolutely. Yes.
Drove the internet, right?
or the even the concept of home theater.
Mhm.
There used to be dirty movies that people went to, and then they could do it in their home. So I don't. Probably shouldn't talk a lot a bit about it, but if I have a beer with you at some point, Charlie, I'd be happy to tell you the stories of what
I do remember that, and I also remember how much about televisions and radios and stereos it was before PCs really started to become something more than an advanced cash register or a word processor in an office.
Oh, totally. I remember in 1982, I lobbied Congress to pass Computer Learning Month. It was at IBM's request, and I mean, it was the first thing I ever got through Congress that I was shepherding, and I was very proud of that. But that switch, I remember Bill Gates. Our solution to Comdex going after our exhibitors was to go after Comdex exhibitors, and specifically, we went after Bill Gates to be our keynote speaker, and he became our keynote speaker every year. As others, we had Michael Dell and the head of Gateway and IBM's keynoted a few times because we were trying to define ourselves as being in that IT industry if they were defining themselves by being in our industry. And we battled Comdex for years, and eventually we won. But some of the things and principles we adopted then, like independent auditing of our numbers and being honest with our exhibitors and treating them fairly and not trying to make the most money we can make from the show, but investing in it for the future, with thick carpets and things like that. That's carried us forward very nicely.
Gary, question for you. What role do you think CES has played in the creation of the US tech economy? Which is like one of the biggest engines we had, and it's been just a dramatic shift. But like, if you think about like the influence CES has had on making that happen, what would you say about that?
That is one of the most brilliant and unique questions I've ever gotten about that. So it's not only the U.S. economy; it's the global economy, and we've positioned ourselves globally for a long time to try to say this is where the innovators around the world come.
Right,
So
and there's CES in Asia.
Yeah, we did have that until COVID, but we will have probably around 40,000 people from outside the U.S. coming to CES. Some of them are buying U.S. products and exporting them. Some of them are showing products, and some of them are just like they're from South America and they're just meeting someone from Japan or China. It has nothing to do with us, but it is the biggest international attendance of any event that I could come up with in the U.S. that we could find. So, but where I think we've made the difference is more in Congress and public policy in terms of helping the tech industry and always urging the Congress to be, look, we always favor innovation. You shouldn't have to ask for permission. You have to ignore trial lawyers who try to, shut down things and preserve the status quo. And also we have a culture in the United States that favors new things. We're an immigrant culture. We like to challenge the status quo. We have bright people coming to the U.S. And what we do is we reward them. I mean, even our tax system, some people are upset that Bill Gates and others made a lot of money. To me, that's the system that works because everyone benefits. And I'd rather have that happen in the U.S. than anywhere else. So we've been advocating for free trade, highly skilled immigration, policies that don't, that basically, the big battle that was fought. And I'm hoping you'll get to this because I heard your show a week ago. You talked about it. What I made my career on, honestly, and it ties into this directly, was the battle over the VCR and its legality, which only over a certain age. No, but it wasn't clear it was going to be legal. There was actually a district court decision in a federal court saying it is an illegal product because it violates copyright. And there's a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that basically said that it reversed the lower court decision, and it went to the Supreme Court, and it was argued, and I was part of it. I coordinated all the amici. We did a lot of different things, the Friends of the Court briefs, and then the Supreme Court didn't decide on it because one justice thought they were conflicted, so it was like a 4-4 tie. And then they held it over again, and we were holding our breaths for 2 years because that decision ended up being the Magna Carta decision of the innovation and technology industry. It said it's a legal product because it has significant uses that do not infringe, including full copying of full movies on broadcast television. So that was really important for everything else, because there were efforts to make copying machines illegal, to make the internet illegal as the biggest copying machine, as it was called. And a lot of technologies, whether they be video cameras or others, there was all sorts of crazy ideas to stop them from recording anything that's copyrighted. And now we're in that similar situation. It's an analogous one. And last week you were talking on your show about this. And you were talking about this case the New York Times has brought and others, and it's going to be a big case, and it's likely to go to the Supreme Court. It will not go quickly, I promise you that. It's a very long.
I said 5 years.
Maybe not that. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, but the thing is that technology, artificial intelligence, and building on is exactly what the New York Times does with its reporters. They're pretty famous for not always crediting other journalists and what they've written about, and yet they'll write about it and say some of the same things, and sometimes they'll quote them or refer to them and give them credit. Not always. And that's what libraries do. You go there, you have access to things that are important. The question is whether it's a copyright infringement, and if it is it a fair use? And there's a four-pronged test the Supreme Court laid out. It's in statute of the copyright laws. And it says it's a fair use as a defense against copyright infringement if, depending on four factors, why are you doing it? You know, what's the purpose? Is it educational, helpful? Is it better for society, basically? Second, what percent of the product are you using? Are you using the entire product or a portion of it? Third, and there's two others. And one is what's the impact on the commercial value of the product itself? Like, if I know that the New York Times has written about something, I'm more likely to read the New York Times than I might not. It's the same argument for music on the radio, that's that great. That's another battle fought. But the argument is there's a certain amount of copyrights that are free on the radio broadcast. The radio broadcasters do not pay because they argue that helps music sales. And to a certain extent, it does. And then there's a fourth one, which is less prong of the test, which is less significant. Anyway, that's a fair use test.
We got to bring Gary into the AI copyright thing in a big way. I don't know if you want to do that here, Charlie, or another time.
Actually, Gary brought it up. He told me in an email that he wanted to talk about it.
Can we go there?
Let's go there.
Yeah, let's go there.
I felt we hadn't communicated correctly with you, and I felt very bad about that. And I said, wait a second, I know about this subject because I was involved in the Supreme Court. And once the Supreme Court, and even while I was when like the music industry and the motion picture industry, they were all over Congress trying to get legislation passed. And by sheer luck, I read one of the bills early on, and it was the motion picture industry, and they basically had one paragraph buried at the end of the bill, which you had to figure out, and it would have banned all video rentals. So I went around the country and I organized all these fledgling video retailers into an organization, the Video Software Dealers Association, and we worked with them to kill that legislation, thankfully, because otherwise, you know, let me put it this way, a lot of people wouldn't be as wealthy as they are in Hollywood, you know, repurposing all their videos before we got to a point where you could do things online through, you know, through direct TV and satellite, and obviously through the internet itself and streaming. But well, you know, to distill this,
to distill this down a little bit, you know, when you go back to the VHS discussion, the core of this is usage, right? Personal use versus commercial use, and how that balances out. And then you flash forward to the rise and fall of Napster, to where that sort of led to how people consume music and streaming music services, and then extrapolate that out to streaming video services and the idea of personal use case. Now you look at, like, let's use YouTube TV as an example, right? YouTube TV is effectively the world's largest VHS recorder or DVR, because it basically takes every stream of everything that's floating around on what they call television now and records it all, and you have a perception that you're choosing the things that you want to record. It's just loading it all on servers and keeping it for personal use case, right? So it's interesting, Gary, that you lived right in the center of that juncture and still today do that, right? With what technology is and how it continues to evolve, right? So
yeah, I spent several years of my career, not only from the legal policy point of view, but with CES itself. And there's Sling Media, which was part of that, and Roku, and there's a lot of different technologies. Napster was the case that, you know, was right at the fringes and went over the edge.
Yes.
But there's no and that did not go to the Supreme Court, I do not believe. But the Supreme Court is the supreme law of the land. The Sony Betamax case is the controlling case. If and when AI goes to the Supreme Court, barring congressional action otherwise, that will be the controlling case they spend the most time talking about and referring to, and how it applies here. Is this a fair use or is it not a fair use? And that'll be the issue. But we have a tradition in this country, getting back to your question, Roni, of the fact is we have these libraries, free libraries, which are considered radical at the time in terms of attention with copyright, to get out that information to everyone. And there is a basic purpose of the copyright law, and it's in the Constitution itself. And the Constitution says to promote progress in the useful arts and sciences, basically. It's to promote progress, it's to allow broad public access, and to encourage creativity. If you listen to the motion picture industry or the New York Times, the only purpose of the copyright law is to protect copyright owners. That's not accurate. It is also to allow broad public access to works, and that's why libraries exist. That's why you could still go to a video rental store if you care to and do things in that. That's why you could use copying machines, and that's why you could use the Internet Excel and all sorts of photographers, and even what you're talking about there with YouTube. No other country has taken the same tack that the U.S. has. Some of the countries, you can't even mess with a copyright work. You can buy a piece of art in France, and you're not allowed to change the art, and you must pay a royalty every time it's resold. I mean, the original owner controls everything. But here it's more of a balancing test between public access and encouraging creativity. That's not why you wanted me on the program, I know, but I'm happy.
No, but it's a great topic.
This is a good topic, and obviously everybody does a laundry list of what's going to be at CES. So I think it's much more interesting to hear about your experience with particularly copyright law at such a tremendously relevant time. The only thing I would add to this is I believe there was, even before Betamax, there was the issue of the cassette tape and the ease with which you can record music. And I believe there was a settlement between the tape manufacturers and the RIAA, which is the industry organization for the recording industry. So there was something before that was relevant, right?
Actually, and negotiated. I remember I was actually first time in Greece, in Athens, and I realized I have more in common with the U.S. recording industry than I did the Japanese and European hardware makers. But the issue on that one was actually there was a law. There's a law that specifically bans CD rentals or audio rentals, music rentals. And there's also a law that said there should be a royalty of some type paid, I believe, if there's double cassette recorders or things like that. And I don't think that anyone does it or makes them. And there was a proposal called CBS Copy Code, one of my favorite moments in congressional history, where CBS Records had come up with this crazy system where they would take a notch out of music, and they wanted by law every recorder to respond to that notch taken out. So at the definitive hearing on that, we took out the wedding march and showed that if you tried to record that with your camcorder, not only will you hear the wedding march sound differently because it has a notch of music that's critical to that, where a lot of kids get married to, but it basically, it screws up the music and it doesn't work. And then the music industry realized, the artists figured, oh my gosh, they're doing this to our music, those suits in New York City. And that died quickly.
So, but let's get back to CES. We only have another 10 minutes or so of the show. But at some point, CES went from being the consumer electronics show to being the consumer everything show, right? Because there are cars, there are refrigerators, there's B2B, there's B2C, there's almost every conceivable category, and every square foot of convention space in Las Vegas is taken up, right? I can't cover the whole show anymore. It's just too big. So when did that happen? When did that switch flip that you could mistake it for an auto show?
So yeah, CES 2024 will have over 4,000 exhibitors and over 2.5 million net square feet of exhibit space. You can't see the whole show in 4 days. You can't physically stop at every booth.
Yeah, you'd have to be on a motorcycle.
so it was a strategy that we had. First of all, we don't call it the Consumer Electronics Show. You'll never see us saying that or using it. It's CES, which is known globally. In the U.S., some journalists, including reputable publications, still insist on calling it that, but that's not what we call it. It's the CES, 3 letters, that's it. And the belief, which I've articulated from the CES keynote stage every year for at least 20 years now, is that every company is a technology company, and technology is getting so sophisticated that different vertical, the success in business now comes from basically collaboration, joint ventures, cross-licensing. no one company can own all the technology, so they have to deal with each other. They have to license it to each other. They have to figure out what each other has. And we have all these like ingredients that are out there, especially sensing devices, which have become super cheap because of billions of smartphones sold. So there's so many different sensors in there. If you could put them together in a smart way and capture the data and transmit it, you could do all sorts of entrepreneurs create new things. And we're seeing that in automobiles, we're seeing that in healthcare, we're seeing that in so many other different areas of endeavor to solve fundamental human problems. That's why we're working with the United Nations now. And the United Nations top tech envoy reporting the Secretary General of the United Nations just recognized access to technology as a fundamental human security, along with access to food, clean air, clean water, healthcare, and technology is now there. And that's we had a press conference with this guy in the UN to announce this a few months ago, and now we're at CES talking about it even more because these are solving big problems, and that's what you'll see at CES. It used to be, you're right, it used to be audio and video entertainment. We coined the phrase home theater. We brought along HD TV. We were proud of that, and we grew. But we also, frankly, as someone producing an event in an industry, we realized that there's furloughs, ups and downs to any industry, and we'd be better off if we had other industries which we knew would be effective. We knew the auto industry was going to be there. We've been saying that more and more of the car will be electronic for at least 2 or 3 or even 4 decades now. We also knew healthcare. There's a shortage of physicians and technicians and nurses all around the world, and yet we're all getting older. We need help there.
Yeah,
and
health tech has really grown the past 5 years. Really grown.
Technology and mobility both are absolutely huge, but there's educational. There's a lot in the business to business realm. There's factories being run by. There's a lot in robotics, and now you have this overlay of artificial intelligence and the global focus, especially with the UN and others, on sustainability. And you have so many different things going on at the same time that. Look what we own in our homes. I remember we used to say the average family owns 7 of our products, and then we got up to 30. Now we stopped counting. I mean, we don't count anymore how many products people own because what do you count? Like everything? Does that count on my watch and my phone? I mean, it's just everyone has a lot of stuff, and it does good things. So and the evolution of innovation is happening quicker and quicker. More people are getting in, and let's be honest, the barriers to entry, unless you're a chip company, are pretty, or making TV sets. The barriers to entry are pretty low. I mean, if you have a computer now and a broadband, you could create an internet business. If you wanted to have something made, you could go to CES. We have an area of CES where you want stuff made, and there's a whole bunch of factory people there. We'll be thrilled to talk to you. They'll make your product for you. And people have gotten good at design about products, and then companies like Apple and others come along, and Samsung and Sony and LG, and you have these incredible companies with brand names that are respected, solving huge problems. And even like what Microsoft did this week, which is brilliant. They had a little key on their board, and you'll see it at CES. And all of a sudden you're accessing their AI bot, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
No, please.
Oh, it's just interesting, Gary, to hear the thread of this conversation. And how many cycles, how your level of foresight into the realization that CES would ultimately effectively become an advocate for technology lobbying around the world, like the understanding of that technology would effectively be in every consumer use case, right? And that it sort of permeated the society of almost every culture around the world, to the point where it's just interesting, like how far back do you think you went when you realized that you would actually be more of a political agent and a lobbying agent and working with governments and societies to kind of understand that over the years technology would embed itself into more and more product categories and into the everything of everything? That's kind of an interesting sort of touch point, that your thread of everything you've discussed has effectively been that.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know, honestly. I think it was more evolutionary than revolutionary, but it's been, for me, 40 years. When I went to my first CES, I said, I want to be part of this. This is the most exciting thing I've ever seen. It's the free marketplace, company by company. The companies on a global basis, the biggest brands in the world, are saying, this is how we want to be seen by the world. To the 4,000 or 5,000 press that are there, to the investment community, to potential partners, and they show stuff to everyone at CES, and then they have private areas and hotel rooms and meeting rooms that are private, and I totally get it. And I don't have any patents. I don't own anything, but I did have a long time passion and the belief of innovation as a force for good, and CES is a place where globally it should happen. I mean, we made incremental changes, like we put international in front of our name. A marketing person suggested that to me on our team. And I said, sure, why not? It was a long word, but all of a sudden, all these people started showing up all around the world. It's like I felt like, the airport, this little airport next to the Detroit airport that calls itself international because I have one flight to Canada. But all of a sudden, you call yourself international. It's a big deal. And there's a lot of things like that happen in getting people together. But what's weird is that we are a U.S. Canadian trade association. We advocate for policies in the U.S. We rank countries around the world about how innovation friendly they are. But that's more of a tool to get them to do what we want as Americans. And we're very transparent in how we do it and what we say. And it's amazing to me how serious the companies take it, and they get upset when they're not ranked as high. And we say, well, argue with us about the criteria. We could look at them, and we do change them. But globally, it's a CES is one of the few events in the United States that's the global event in the area. And it's really tough to come up with another one, frankly. And if you look at Trade Show Executive, which publishes size statistics, we're so far ahead of everyone else as an annual event that it's in a way it's a burden because everyone's going after you, and you encounter issues and challenges that others don't, like how many flights get into Las Vegas and where can we get
all the logistics.
So we actually made a conscious effort several years ago to cut down the number of people that come to CES because we wanted a good experience for everyone. We didn't want them and we still have that love for the startup, the entrepreneur. We have something called Eureka Park, and we subsidized. We'll have 1,200 companies from around the world there.
Yeah, that's where I spend most of my time at CES is Eureka Park. Because I'm studying 10 years, where we look at, like now I'm looking at the 2030s. What does it look like? So you're not going to see that in the main show floor. You're going to see that at Eureka Park. And it's a fascinating melange of countries and international presence and all that.
Oh, it's huge. And it comes, a lot of ambassadors and senior officials and mayors and governors and different people from government, and even our government will have, I think, the biggest roundup of senators we've ever had coming to the show. Sadly, the House of Representatives in session, but we have a lot of senators from the Commerce Committee speaking at CES. And when they see it and they go there, they have a different appreciation for how they regulate and legislate. And they understand the entrepreneurial nature. They understand the global competition we're in because CES shows it right there. There'll be companies from China and from Korea and all around the world. And they want what we have, and that's the tough thing for us.
Charlie, can I ask one more thing before we do some wrap up stuff? I want to get a little bit into some of the anecdotal stuff for our listeners. Something that, like your moments at CES that were so important. I'll reference, if you remember, when you saw the Walkman and how the Walkman represented the first time at CES, and if you had a personal experience to that, or other like markers in time across this now 40 plus year journey where you're just like, holy shit, this is going to be a big deal. And like your particular perspective on those iconic moments over time.
Well, the Walkman was the late 70s, and I wasn't there yet. And I actually had a Walkman before I went to CES, and I thought it was really cool to have portable music like that. And I defended some of the, the ability to record because the music industry didn't make good quality tapes, so you have to make your own. But there's so many moments. Like one was seeing HD TV for the first time, and it was a Japanese NHK, the broadcaster there. They showed something. I said, "Wow, TV!"
I was there, and I remember that very distinctly.
And I spent 5 years of my career, actually more, working on HD TV to get to the best possible standard in the world in the U.S. And we did it right. I mean, I spent I could do 2 shows on HD TV. But I have written 3 books, and a lot of what I've said is in there, and I have a 4th one coming out in the 3rd quarter, which I realized, I was told by an interviewer yesterday, is online now in terms of being promoted. It's called Pivot or Die. It starts really with COVID and talks about how you companies and people made decisions to change what they were doing, and why you have to do that more quickly now than ever. But in terms of other things, I think it's some of the products that were introduced with a lot of hype that were really nothing. I think of Coleco, which had the Atom doll, and they had the Atom computer rather, and they put this device in a glass case, and everyone took pictures of it, and they couldn't find how you could get a computer that small. Same thing that Sanyo Fisher did with the camcorder. They just had this tiny camcorder in a case, and everyone was taking photos, and engineers were trying to figure out how they did it. Both of those cases, it was just total marketing flim flam. It wasn't real.
Yeah.
But they drove everyone crazy at the show. So that wasn't one. I mean, I could come up with a lot of products. A lot of them that I'm seeing more lately are more like, wow, look what that will do for healthcare. Look how that will empower so many people with disabilities, with that specific disability, or to see again, or to walk again, or to read again, or to magnify, or when Delta Airlines Ed Bastian was showing how the people who move, but the baggage handlers, this will magnify their strength, this thing they wear. It was so cool. Or when John Deere as a keynoter talked about how they have used the internet and precision agriculture to cut down dramatically on the use of seed, water, and fertilizer, and do it 24 hours a day to feed the world. I mean, there are moments like that where I got chills. Or Netflix CEOs, I'll never forget when Reed Hastings announced that Netflix is going international. Watching their stock go up as he was saying it, like in my seat in the keynote room, like I got goosebumps. I don't know, maybe it says more about me than the technology, but it was just, businesses are made and lost there, and there's so much on the line. It's a very exciting place to be, and I'm privileged to have this job, to be at the forefront of innovation and see all the different groups come together and see right there and meet the innovators.
Wow, that's a great perspective and a great place for us to end our show here. One last question. CES is famous for its parties that the big companies put on. What do you think was the best one ever?
I think it was the best party ever.
Yeah.
Well, don't confuse me as the person who goes to the parties late at night anymore. Sometimes I feel like I'm like the prettiest girl in high school and never gets asked out on a date because everyone thinks I have one. Like I used to go to like 7 or 8 receptions in a night, and now like I'm looking at my dance card and I only have 3 dances like the first night of the show. Like, what's going on here? What happened? Including our own big member party, which is a cool thing that we have. So I usually go to our parties, if you want to know the truth. And it's but I don't know, if someone's listening, they're having a cool party and they send an invitation my way. My wife loves to go out to parties at CES. So she makes those big decisions.
I guess I'll say the same thing. I think I am busy most every evening with some kind of event, but I always welcome the invitations. So I actually was going to say,
I like to invite you, even if it's to say no.
Exactly. So it is kind of fun every year when my inbox starts filling up a few days before CES with pitches and press releases and invitations and people who want to hang out. So that is one of the great things.
There was one
I was going to say people is one of the great things because it's like we're coming together with everybody.
It was the Monster used to have a great party every year.
Yes, I went to many of the Monster concerts over the years.
And it's interesting, the person who ran that for Noli of Monsters, her name is Dina Gazarian. And she's now chairman of our board. She has her own startup company. She's doing well, and she's the chairman. And she brings a little of that Monster flavor to some of the things we do now.
Monster had like the massive A-level bands. I remember seeing Fleetwood Mac one year at the Monster party. It was unbelievable. Then Stevie Wonder in the after party. It was kind of amazing. Yeah, kind of amazing thing.
All right, Gary. Well, we'll let you go. I know you've got a lot to do. Thank you for taking out the time, especially at a moment like this, to speak with us. I would have to rate this conversation. Our conversation with Brian last week was great, but I'm not sure anybody is going to top you.
It's a good one-two punch.
We're really excited about CES. I mean, I'm excited to see everybody. I'm excited to see what's coming for the year. One thing CES lets you do is get the zeitgeist of the coming year in tech. And I always come away with a really holistic view. So I think that's the power of CES. So anyway, we'll see everybody in Las Vegas. Again, reach out to Ted and I this week at XR@gmail.com. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for joining us.